Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for this event, which promises to be a very rich and insightful conversation about one of the most important and pressing agenda items of our times. I will start off by announcing that we have the privilege of having an opening statement from none other than David Nabarro, whom many of you know. He's the UN Secretary General's advisor on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and he will deliver a message on behalf of the Secretary General. So let us start by inviting David to the podium. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Actually, I'm here as a messenger, and what's happened is that the United Nations Secretary General wanted to offer a statement at the beginning of this event, and a statement that's on the record, and my job is to read it to you, and I will read it to you as though I am him. So when I say I, it means the Secretary General. So here we go. It's a great pleasure to greet this important side event. Thank you for your presence in Marrakesh and for your commitment to climate action. Reaching zero hunger by 2030 is crucial for achieving all the Sustainable Development Goals. Quite simply, people who are well nourished live, learn, and work far more substantively than those who are poorly nourished. They contribute to economic growth and to human development. But despite great progress in the fight against hunger, everybody knows that there are still too many people who are undernourished today. And climate change threatens to aggravate matters even further. Erratic weather patterns and an increase in the outbreaks of pests and diseases are affecting our ability to produce the food that we need. And we've seen such impacts in recent months as El Niño hit Africa, Asia, Central America, and other parts of the world. The Paris Agreement recognizes the fundamental priority of safeguarding food security and ending hunger, and the particular vulnerabilities of food production systems to the adverse impacts of climate change. Countries are already making progress by including agriculture and food systems in their intended nationally determined contributions, or INDCs, under the Paris Agreement. Agricultural sectors are leading elements in 90% of the national climate pledges for developing countries. Our challenge now is to scale up investments in rural development and to support climate adaptation. Decisions that are going to be made at COP22 hold immense potential to accelerate and amplify global action towards a world free of hunger and malnutrition. Climate change, extreme poverty, hunger and malnutrition have to be addressed together, and sustainable, resilient and inclusive agriculture and food systems that deliver for people and planet are key to doing so. Agriculture and food systems that are people-centered, sustainable and resilient are central to achieving the transformations envisaged in the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda. And so the Secretary General ends. I urge all governments and partners to do what they can to deliver on our promise to be the zero hunger generation. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the honor of being here and reading this statement for the Secretary General. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much, Dr. Navarro. I now have the distinct pleasure of inviting the first panelist to join me. Could I please ask His Royal Highness Prince Mustafa Saher to join me? Honorable Inia Serui, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill this name. Siriatu. Thank you, sir. His Excellence Luis Felipe Araúz Cavallini, His Excellency Sili Epa Tuyoti, and Mr. Vinao Ganas. I'm going to kill it again. I'm really good at other things. Names is definitely not one of them. Thank you very much. So we're here to talk about how we deliver on food security and zero hunger. We heard a very compelling message from the Secretary General, and we all know that this is an agenda that needs to deliver not just on the food security, but that also is an agenda, I would say, of opportunity. It's an opportunity where there's a strong convergence between the SDGs and the NDCs on both mitigation and adaptation. It's an agenda that delivers on equity through jobs and livelihoods. It's an agenda where the private sector comes to play, private sector, whether it's global multinationals or small farmers cooperatives. So this is an agenda also of inclusion. It's an enormous opportunity, and yet it's an agenda that is incredibly complex and incredibly challenging. So I hope that the panel, the two panels that we're going to have today can help us make inroads into understanding and unpacking opportunities, what are the entry points, and how we can really bring this to bear and make this a reality. How can we meet SDG2? All right, so with that, I would like to turn to His Excellency Prince Mustafa Saher, who should be very happy. He has one of the few names I haven't massacred so far. Your Excellency, how is your country dealing with the current impacts of climate change in the agricultural sector? And what is your vision for the future? How can you address this phenomenon?
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to thank FAO and the World Food Programme for having this important side event today, as well as His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations' message, which was extremely encouraging. To answer your two questions, first of all, and I would like to also say hello to all of our friends who have taken the interest and are present here today, their excellencies, and I should say my sisters and my brothers who are here. You're very welcome. First of all, Madam, I'm happy to report that the cabinet of my government has approved the Paris Agreement. It's on its last phase and stage going through the Parliament, and I believe in the next month or two, it will be ratified. So we are well over 100 nations now that has ratified the Paris Agreement, which I attended last year in December. Afghanistan had given its INDC back in September to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, and now we are submitting very soon, when I say very soon, in the next, again, month or so, our NDC to the Secretariat. As you know, Afghanistan is an agricultural country. 61 to 65% of the people are directly involved with agriculture. As His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations noted, erratic weather patterns, floodings, droughts, food insecurity, and uncertainty, coupled with the ongoing conflict that's going on with terrorist organizations trying to set up base in my country, has compounded already the problems that we have. It's making things more difficult for the people of Afghanistan, and for whom? For the most vulnerable and for the poorest of the poor. For the poorest of the poor, they're suffering the most. So we have programs set with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Ministry of Rural Development and Rehabilitation, to go to the spots where these people are vulnerable. We have already done an extensive study for the last 3 or 4 years. And the modeling that we have done, and the FAO and the WFP has been extremely helpful in this. I believe that we have a huge challenge on our hands, and we are very much worried that other nations who gave the commitments during the Paris conference on climate change, although I see that enthusiasm here up to today, that words by themselves and slogans cannot solve our problems. When I say our problems, are collective global problems was really need to be turned into actions, and actions into realities in order to help, as I mentioned before, the most vulnerable people, whether if it's in my country, whether if it's in any other country. We all live on one planet. It's one little blue dot in the celestial heavens. We don't have any other place to go. We have to live. We have to tolerate each other. We have to live with each other together. We have to help each other out. We have to look out for each other. And whoever thinks that the issue of climate change is a joke that's been made up, they're mistaken. I would like to invite them, I would invite them personally to my country, and I'll show them the alarming glacial melt that's happening in the northern part of my country, which is one of the largest producers of fresh water through the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountains and through the Amu Darya, which we share with our neighbors to the north. And of course, we have to engage in transboundary dialogue in a most realistic manner and not be selfish about this, because water is life, and without fresh water, we cannot exist, as we know. Life cannot go on. So we have to have programs, transfer of clean technologies to developing countries such as Afghanistan. And by the way, in that region, Afghanistan, in the immediate region, is the most vulnerable country, and in the world, on the planet, is the 14th most vulnerable country on climate change. Climate change has direct effect on agriculture, and agriculture has got direct effect on food security. So because I do not wish to take more of your time, these are the programs that we have in mind. We have engaged the people, and it's got to be a participatory process on behalf of the people. We have engaged the farmers, we have engaged the pastoralists. I have myself traveled in the remotest parts of Afghanistan, including the Wakhan corridor, no less than 4 times. And I've seen the glacial melt with my own eyes, comparing it from the month of June to the month of November. It is extremely alarming for a small country, landlocked country, such as Afghanistan, as I mentioned before, compounded by war, by terrorism, and so on. So therefore, if we all work together in one voice, as one block, as part of humanity, I think we can go forward. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And thank you for highlighting that the extraordinary political commitment that was evidenced in Paris has to be met by adequate support for action. So with that, I would now like to turn to the Honorable Inia Seriratu. I think I've improved. And I would very much like to ask, how is Fiji bringing climate resilient practices to local communities? SIDS are at the forefront of the impacts. So it's really critical to understand, how has your government incorporated local knowledge into its own plans? SID's situation is unique, and your local knowledge is unique in terms of finding ways forward.
Thank you. Sorry, before answering the question, let me just again highlight the fact that for Fiji, thank you for including Fiji, and of course I represent SIDS in this side event. This is very, very critical for us because of a few reasons. Again, you know how vulnerable we are, and we are amongst the worst affected as well when it comes to climate change and disasters. For Fiji alone, we've had 2 Category 4s and 1 Category 5 most recently. Cyclone Thomas in 2010, Category 4. Again, Cyclone Evans in 2012, Category 4. And in February this year, Cyclone Winston, Category 5. As much as we want to grow agriculture, and through agriculture bring economic resilience and growth into our economy, and of course food security, but the cycle of disasters and of course the devastating effects of climate change is always pulling us back. But that does not in any way affect us. We are focused on the SDGs, and we are focused on zero hunger. And of course, we are committed to providing food security and of course, economic security for our people as well. And we have learned a lot from this. We are here to talk about sustainable development and of course, how that includes agriculture and of course, food security and zero hunger. There are three major lessons that we have learned. One is the way we live. It's going to change. The new norm is going to be disasters in terms of frequency and severity, intensity. So we should be changing the way we do things, because the way we live in the future is going to be different. And I know that there are partners in here as well, and we look forward to your assistance, continuous assistance, because of the vulnerability that I've talked about. Two is the way we do development. Not just doing development for the sake of development. We need to look at risk reduction so that development can be sustainable in the long term. And thirdly is the way we cooperate. Government have huge responsibilities, but of course we have partners, we have friends, and hopefully that we will continue to enhance on this so that we can meet the expectations and the needs of the people out there. Two components to your question. I'll answer that very briefly in my limited time. How is Fiji bringing climate resilience to the communities? I'll mention four major approaches. One is capacity building. That is very, very critical, and I think is the most important approach. Because for development to be sustainable, it takes people. I, for one, will argue that. We can have the best resources, we can have the best genetics, we can have the best environment and the weather and the finances, but development cannot be sustainable if we neglect capacity building. So we need to cultivate the people for development to be sustainable, because it's farmers who are going to produce. And I acknowledge the IFAD president for their book on smallholder farming concept, because that's very relevant to us when we're talking about food security. Because one of the challenges that we in these small island developing states face, that we have a lot, or the majority of our farmers are smallholder subsistence farmers. Although maybe seen as a weakness for a long time, but we see opportunities in this. How do we make them economically viable and vibrant so that they can provide food security and of course contribute towards economic growth as well? So capacity building is very, very critical for us, and of course we have a lot of focus, emphasis on this. Awareness, advocacy, that is a continuous process. People need to be made aware. People need to take responsibility. People need to take ownership. If development has to be sustainable and of course taking into consideration the needs of the people as well. Demonstration farms and farmer technical schools. Again, I've talked about capacity building. These are important. Some farmers cannot provide on their own. The new technology, and that is my next point, and husbandry practices. We've talked about adaptation and risk reduction and mitigation. How can it's through demonstration farms, and it's through farmer technical schools where the people can have access to this. You asked the second component of your question is briefly on the local knowledge. Of course, we value the importance of local knowledge, and we want to preserve our local knowledge. But there is a challenge in this. It's the market-oriented forces. It's the change in dynamics. As much as we want to retain the local knowledge in terms of the crops and the seasonalities, but then people now have a choice. They focus more on the economic gains rather than the social. So this is one of the challenges that we face. I'll give Fiji as an example. People neglect their own food security, the farmer. We promote integrated farming for them to look at their own food security, but most of them are concentrating on agricultural commodities that have easy market or markets available rather than, so they neglect their food security. So these are, but we want to, as much as possible, retain our local knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you for flagging some of the conundrums that are faced. But I think your call for capacity building and technology, particularly for smallholders, is something that resonates very widely in the group. I also take the opportunity to congratulate Fiji as incoming presidency of COP23. We're looking forward for you to bring this wisdom into the UNFCCC. So I now have the pleasure of handing over to His Excellency Luis Felipe Araúz Cavallini. Costa Rica is a country that's known for its leadership in these areas. So we'd be very delighted to know how can countries best address climate resilience, agriculture, and food security under the Paris Agreement? What can Costa Rica teach us?
Thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to state that we tend to see the impact of climate change on food security in a linear way, but the interactions are much more complex. Not only because the complexity of the relationship of agriculture with climate change, both as a victim, an emitter, and a part of the solution. So it is more complex than that, but also food security has to do with food supply. That means production, of course, but also the access to food, that is the poverty or the wealth of the people, and also poor eating habits and poor health, or a combination of those. For example, there's a book called Waste of Tristram Stewart from Britain. He states that 10% of the emissions of the United States and the UK come from the production, transport, and preparation of food that is never consumed, food waste. And that has a toll on the environment. Also, poor health. If people are sick, if they don't have clean water supply, if they have infectious diseases impacted by climate change, the utilization of food for the nutrition also is impaired. So these are examples of the complexity of the relationship of climate change with food security, and of course with SDG2. They all impact or are impacted by climate change. And of course, the SDG2 will be impossible to achieve if we're not able to reach the goals set in Paris 2015. This is why we think that agriculture, which accounts, I hate to say it, which accounts for about 15% of the emissions of greenhouse gases, should not only adapt to climate change, but should contribute to climate change reduction. Put it in a simple way, the more greenhouse gas we emit in the atmosphere, the more difficult adaptation becomes. So adaptation mitigation should go together. That's what we are doing in Costa Rica with our projects with low carbon coffee and low carbon livestock, the Nama coffee and the Nama livestock, in which we're working on practices that both mitigate and help adaptation. One example, shade trees in pastures. Shade trees capture carbon, but also the shade provides for a better environment for the animals that are in the pasture, The data show about 5 degrees centigrade difference in the shade in the sun and an increase 15% of milk production. So I think that's a win-win proposition. So SDG2 and SDG13 go together, but the other SDGs also contribute. For example, good infrastructure, which is one of the SDGs, reduce vulnerability, especially in rural areas. Innovation, which is one of the other SDGs, is necessary for what we call climate smart agriculture, an FAO concept, Dr. Graciano. We need to realize that in most cases, agriculturally related greenhouse gases result of inefficient agricultural practices. Loss, for example, of nitrous oxide from soil is valuable nitrogen that didn't form protein in the animals. So if we reduce those inefficiencies, we're able to mitigate and increase productivity. There's where knowledge, traditional scientific knowledge comes into play. So we need climate smart agriculture, emphasizing the word smart to reduce inefficiencies. We need to enhance productivity. So we need an agricultural system that is intensive, but not in inputs, but in knowledge. So we need research, we need good extension services, and we need to put all this together in a sustainable manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Clearly, Costa Rica has a long track record and experience is very much highlighted in your words. How does agriculture contribute to mitigation and adaptation, and how it cuts across all of the SDG goals and vice versa? So certainly it speaks to that opportunity that we have to grasp. It is now my pleasure to turn to Mr. Vinau Gnasunu, and he will give us some perspectives in terms of examples of successful initiatives that illustrate how climate resilient agriculture and food security can be incorporated at the national level.
Yes, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the 79 countries of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific group of states. Actually, I would say my tasks have been made easier by the intervention of the Minister of Fiji, one of our constituency, who put forward what is the situation that we face or we receive from our member state, and to which we try to respond and put it together some of the programs. So we, as SAP group of states of secretariat, we act as catalysts, putting together a program to respond to the situation which we face in our various countries, and we are grateful to IFA, the FAO, and other partners with whom we have signed MOU and who are helping us to achieve those goals. I'll maybe cite the example of what we have been doing in the Global Index Insurance Facility with the support of the World Bank. And we started like 6-7 years ago because we faced the situation where our countries are totally, when they face a catastrophe, they have no means to act. So the idea was first to see, can we be better prepared and putting in place some insurance capacity in those areas. And of course, you know how insurance works. When they need them, generally, they don't respond. So we work and try to design or to take on board what the work we have been started with other partners. And we, as part of the resources made available with our partners, the EU, we decided to put some of these resources, 25 million euros, into the implementation of some pilot program of this Global Index Insurance Facility. And I would say the results have been great up to now. We have seen, for example, in Kenya, working with the livestock people in Iliri program, where I would say the achievements went much beyond what we were expecting. And our satisfaction is that now the government is now including its own policy, because what we want is to see how we can leverage on the public money. The idea is to try to make, I would say, agriculture more attractive. Responding to all those food sovereignty or food sustainability of food security issues, will need that we invest more in agriculture, knowing that in our countries, it has been said, most of the farmers are smallholders. So how can you facilitate the financing of those agriculture or those farmers? First thing is to make the sector more attractive to financing institutions, and bringing in some insurance element would help facilitating the attractivity of the sectors, but also bringing the youth into the system. No, it has been said if you take the case of Africa, every year we have 8 million youth coming to the employment market, adding to the stock, which is about 80 million already there. So how are you going to give job to those youth, being in urban or peri-urban or rural area? We're trying to ensure that agriculture is more attractive to them. So what we are doing is just to use this global index insurance facility to reply to some of those things. The second element, maybe we can also mention, will be what we are trying to do in terms of private sector development. Again, taking into account what has been the situation in terms of youth unemployment, we are now designing, working with the African Development Bank, and having some program where we can directly put some investment facility. I mean, small amount. Normally, when you speak to the investors, they say, well, if it's below 5 billion euros, it's not worth going there. No, we said, no, what our people need is something from 15,000 euros to maybe 200,000 euros. That's where we can create jobs. So next week we'll be meeting with the African Development Bank, working together a program which will be called Boost Africa, where we can really develop program and activities in countries, working through the region also, because we don't want to create duplication. We want to build on what the country have said to themselves and see how best we can, in the coming years, put some resources to invest into agricultural development in our country. So maybe I'll stop here for now, and if need be, we can come up.
Thank you very much. And you've added to a very rich discussion the importance of really of facilitating the involvement of smallholders, which I think has been echoed by others, and also youth. I mean, this is incredibly important. Well, we've had a very rich set of interventions. We're running a little bit tight on time, so I'm prepared to take one question but if not, I would like to invite our final round of applause for our panelists. I think this was a really fascinating set of exchanges. Very rich set of experiences that I think really resonated in terms of some of the main messages. We are now going to be listening to seeing a video that will enable us to have a transition, and I will be asking the next participants for the following panel to join me here on the podium. So thank you very much. It's here. Ah.
Yes, I do. I do see myself as a change maker here in the ministry, and I think as an individual, at the ministry, this department, this directorate is responsible for sourcing for resources to address the whole issue of climate change.
Knowledge is very important. How can we ensure that whatever is generated can be applied? This is where we need to work closely with various change makers or change agents at different levels, and in particular at the community level.
I consider myself as a change maker because I have information on climate change. And it is my duty to use all appropriate channels to make people build awareness.
Ekirungi kye tufunyeemu mu nkyukakyuka eyo eriwo, batuyigiriza okulima omuddo, ne batuyigiriza n'ennunda y'ente, ente zibadde zivaamu amata matono, kati waliwo enjawulo.
If I was at the COP22, I would really wish to see that the front line of the action is brought to the community groups. We should come to the local governments. That way, we can multiply most of these good practices.
Thank you very much. I would now like to ask the next panel to join us on stage. I'm asking everybody to try to stick to 4 minutes. Okay. We can stay on time. Thank you very much. So in the first panel, we have heard voices from governments and intergovernmental organization. We're now turning to intergovernmental organizations that are leading the support and the work to enable countries to implement their NDCs. So it's really a very privileged panel that we have before us. And I would like to start off by giving the floor to Mr. José Graziano da Silva, FAO's Director General. Mr. Graziano.
Thank you, Paula. Well, I would like to address how we can use this meeting, Marrakesh, to take actions, concrete actions, and how can agriculture and food system become more climate resilient. Let me start with the first point. I think that now we have these national determined contributions. We have 4 out of 5 of them, more or less 80%. That is linked to the SDG2, to eradicate hunger and all forms of malnutrition. So this gives a clear idea how important is this issue of food security and how it is linked to climate change. It was already addressed. Minister Araúz told us a good point on that, the linkage with food waste and loss, that takes into 10% of the gas emissions. Let me add 2 numbers to that. 10% is also the impact of deforestation. So food waste and loss is equivalent of the impact of deforestation. We have many people concerned about forests, but wasting their food in the day-to-day life, doing nothing on their own capacity to reduce food waste and loss. And let me add a point. I don't want to blame the consumers for that. It's not about the food we waste on the table. It's the whole chain. It's the food system that need to be better adequated, because we waste when we till the soil. Sometimes we don't need to. Zero tillage is one of the good recommendations for impact of climate change, reduce the impact of climate change. We wasted the seeds that are not appropriated, use it or storage. We waste the inputs we use, and so on. And then we have bad conditions on transports that we wasted, lost a lot of food, especially in countries, developing countries, like African countries, for example, where most important part of the food that is lost during the transportation and storage process. So this is just to give an idea of that, how we can act. We can also act with new systems of reduction. And we have new technology available, like the agroecology with a lot of promise. We have also what we call in FAO save and grow approach to produce more using less chemical inputs and so on. So there are many things that we can do. But in addition to that, I would like to say also what FAO is doing to take this opportunity of Marrakesh to move ahead. And we believe that unfortunately, despite we didn't have no agreement on the agriculture commitments, now we need to pave the way. We have 1 year to do that, to come to Bonn with those things solved. And one of the most important things that I would like to say, according to our experience in FAO, and we have a lot of experience on that, we don't see that is relevant, this idea to split adaptation and mitigation, not in agriculture sectors. This could be important for energy sectors, as we discussed in Paris last year. But in agriculture issues, when we adapt, we already mitigate. The things come together. It's very difficult to separate them. So the issue that they are being discussing and paralyzed decision here is just an excuse not to go to the real point. Who will finance? Where the money will come? Because smallholder farmers, family farmers, subsistence farmers cannot adapt if they don't have new tools, new technology, and someone needs to fund it. Most of the developing countries don't have capacity to do that because they don't have research system, extension system in place anymore. So this needs to come from somewhere. And we do have in place mechanisms, new mechanisms, the GAF, the Climate Fund, and others that can provide this. So let's not stop the action process in course. We need to do that. We are committed, working with IFAD to assist countries in preparing their projects, their proposals for the GAF, to GLIM fund, etc., to get the funding, to get the money to allow small farmers to adopt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the FAO's leadership in this space is widely recognized, but I really thank you for highlighting the fact that, particularly in adaptation, the co-benefits between mitigation and adaptation are decisive. And that's where, in the previous panel, we heard conversations about win-wins and opportunities for win-wins. And I think that this is really a space that we need to help countries think through. As you say rightly, we work in the coming months to help countries flesh out their NDCs. So I now have the pleasure of following with the president of IFAD, Mr. Kanayo Kinwazi. And I would ask you a slightly different question. What do you think are the most urgent priorities for climate risks, for climate sensitive investment at scale, and where? Building on some of the considerations that Mr. Graziano has just put forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. but the questions that I've been asked to answer, questions have been asked, has sort of evolved over the last few days, and from what you've just said. But I think the answer I will give will respond to your question as well as build on what has been said. And I want to make 4 points very quickly because I understand we have 4 minutes or thereabout. First, we need to focus. And to do that, we need to have a total change in mindset. I'll tell you why. Why do we need to focus? The question I'm asking you, and you just please follow my logic. Where do the poorest and hungriest people in the world live? In developing countries. Where in developing countries are they most abundant? Rural populations, rural areas. What is the main source of their livelihoods and their lives? Agriculture in its broadest sense. What kind of agriculture? Smallholder agriculture. Now we're looking at, you have the statistics, about 500 million small farms catering for about 2.5 to 3 billion people on our planet. That's roughly half of our present population. You want to achieve zero hunger? You must focus. So that's our client. Where do they live? Rural areas, oftentimes very badly, very bad environments, very rough environments, neglected, oftentimes marginalized and forgotten. Point number 2, how can we support smallholder farmers to manage climate risks? It has been said, but I'll give you a very broad outline. Climate finance, in order for them to manage risks. And we can do this in many ways. Renewable energy, early warning systems, managing agriculture in the broadest sense, crops, livestock, aquaculture, fisheries, forestries, and what have you. At the landscape level, at community level, this has been mentioned. Let's come down from our pinnacle of knowledge that we think we have and work at the community level. As the Honorable Minister from Fiji said, and I'll put it in my own way, development is not something we do for people or to people. Development is what people do for themselves. People-centered, owned by them. We can bring the knowledge, we can bring the support, we can catalyze, but change can only be made by people themselves. I can give you other aspects of investments to support how rural people can manage climate risks. I think I'm halfway through my time. Another point is, amongst these rural people, whom should we focus on? Rural women. If we do not give rural women the same opportunities as we give to their men, we will not achieve rural transformation. My experience of 40 years in all fields of agriculture shows very clearly, when you invest in a rural man, you invest in an individual. When you invest in a rural woman, you invest in a community. Final point, youth. We have to build the farmers of tomorrow. And that is our young population. Farmers are, in most parts of Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Asia, are in their 50s and 60s. But that tomorrow for youth starts today. Because today was tomorrow yesterday. So if you keep saying we'll do it tomorrow, it will soon be yesterday. So we have to start today. Madam Chair, I am fully convinced that we shall not achieve zero hunger without rural transformation. Thank you.
Many thanks to Mr. Nwanze for really a very, I think, inspiring and thought-provoking intervention. Again, we hear the call, especially for youth, and the call for the participation, the greater participation of women, which we hadn't heard before. So thank you for bringing that to the table. That's really critical. We now have the privilege of turning to our third panelist, Mr. Carlos Caramella, the Deputy Director General of the Middle East, North Africa, Europe, and CIS countries at the World Food Programme. Building on the previous interventions, I'd like to ask you, what are good examples of early warning and early action systems at global, regional, and national and local levels to prevent hunger and climate disaster? The previous panelists mentioned this, but it'd be good to get your deeper thoughts about this.
Deeper thoughts. Many thanks, Chair. And I'm here representing the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Erta Inkhausen. We have the Executive Board ongoing in Rome, and she has been held back. Greetings. So many thanks. I'm really pleased to be part of this panel. I think it's a very important, well, it's a central theme, as a matter of fact, and I'm very pleased to be with the directors, with the executive level of the partner agencies who play such an important role in this. The World Food Programme has a slightly different angle to this issue because we are, let's say, a bit more at the forefront of emergencies. And so we try to look ahead at what the future is going to be like. And if you wish, we are trying to read the challenge of SDG2, looking ahead at what is possible to achieve in 14 years, because that's the time frame we have ahead of us. And we look at climate change as an accelerator and a multiplier of risks in the countries in which we operate, which are generally countries that have deep poverty, extraordinary problems of demographic pressure, scarcity of resources, and they're exposed to risk factors that come from environment and weather and climate. So our vision is a vision that is future-oriented and looks at the protective safety net, the protective environment, and looks at the focuses on exactly the same populations on which partner agencies focus: population at risk, vulnerable, population who have, however, a productive potential. WP has been working on early warning systems for many years. It links early warning systems to vulnerability analysis. Working with partners like FAO, like IFAD, and many others, we are able to anticipate disasters and intervene early on. A typical example of this has been El Nino over the last couple of years. We have been able to anticipate the onset of El Nino. We have been able to intervene, activate, and support national systems and regional systems. And by doing so, we've been able to mitigate the impact of these disasters. There are a number of sophisticated systems that are being developed at global, regional, national, and community level. And there is clear evidence of the benefits of early warning, particularly in support to communities and to national institutions to achieve a better management of risk. The elephant in the room is of course financing, is the availability of predictable funding for emergencies. It is capacities. It is the ability to communicate well early warnings to communities. It is the ability to intervene effectively through extension systems, offering options and opportunities. And it is, in the long term, the ability to also offer more systemic futures to people in need. Early warning systems, to conclude, function well when you have an array of other factors that contribute to managing risks in countries that see an increasing exposure to such risks, in countries that see intersecting risk drivers that require approaches that are more integrated, more multidimensional, more multi-stakeholder, and based on resources that should be at hand before to make an investment on the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to highlight what you're talking about, not just the increased exposure to risk, but the fact that of the intersecting risk profiles. It echoes very much a lot of the conversations we've been having earlier about the need for multidimensional, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approaches. So I now have the pleasure to give the final question to the last panelist, best for last, of course. I would like now to turn to Ms. Essel Sennhauser, who's the Director of the Agricultural Global Practice at the World Bank Group. And I would like to ask her, continuing the conversation that we're having, what can be done to redirect climate and agriculture finance to work towards more resilient climate food systems and the fulfillment of SDG2? What can the World Bank teach us?
The World Bank doesn't teach things, but look, you're asking me a very interesting question. Indeed, the role that agriculture is playing on climate finance today is very, very small. If I ask the audience, how big do you think that agriculture is in the overall climate financing today? You will probably be surprised. But we are a meager 2%, 3% of all the climate finance in the world. It hasn't changed much in the last years. So why it is so low when agriculture and land use change at 25% of the emissions in the world? If we are so big of a problem, why is financing so low? And I think that I would like to bring that question to all of us, because all of us here are very interested in agriculture and land use change. That's why we are here talking about SDG2. And I would think that we have two things to do. The first one is to continue generating awareness on why agriculture and climate change are so linked. And the second one is to show that agriculture can make a difference and can deliver on climate commitments. So let me elaborate on the first one. How do we raise awareness? Now, it took us 22 COPs to have an agriculture day in a COP. We only had it today. It's taking place in a room here in front of us. And it took the leadership of the government of Morocco and to reach out to many other players and to put an agriculture day in a COP. I look forward to having COP23 also with an agriculture day, Mr. Minister, and I look forward to your cooperation to making that happen. But it's taken a long time, and it's taken a long way to do that. We need to be able to say convincingly that if we don't do anything with agriculture and climate change, we are going to be the challenge of climate change in 2050. Today, we're 25% of the emissions. In 2050, if we don't do anything, we're going to be 70% of that problem. Okay? We are continue doing agriculture and land use today as we used to do it 100 years ago. We need to change. We need to do agriculture in a different way. We cannot take the risk to continue doing agriculture and not being part of the climate change discussions, technically, financially, etc. So if we were to keep our relative contribution and go to a 2 degrees centigrade of permissible emissions, we need to reduce today 60% of the emissions that are coming from the sector. Okay, that's a big challenge to all of us. But those are arguments that help us to say what we do matters. We need to do this, and we need to be part of these discussions. When showing that we can deliver, we have with the NDCs an incredible opportunity to show that agriculture can be part of the solution to climate change. We are the only sector that can help healing the planet, okay? Agriculture and land use change. We fix carbon. We take the carbon back from the atmosphere and we put it back on the soils. No other sector can claim that. Only agriculture and land use can claim that, okay? So we need to use those tools to say, look, we are here. We can help on healing the planet. We can help on making us better. And do that while we feed the world. So all our small farmers that we're all thinking about can be the doctors of this world moving forward. That's an extremely powerful argument to make. Now, we know we can do it because we have heard experiences from Costa Rica, from many of you, from many of the countries, that climate-smart agriculture technologies work, and that we can do this in a way that is different to what it was done in the past. The Minister of Fiji was talking today about thinking about the future. We cannot continue doing agricultural transformation as we did it 30 years ago. We have to do it based on what is going to come in the future. Okay, if we do it as we did it 30 years ago, we are not catching up. We have to do agriculture on what is going to come, what the weather and natural resource conditions are going to be 20, 30 years from now. We know it today, the information is there, technology is there, data there, we have to project those things in a different way. Agriculture finance and how that can help on the SDGs. Now, we do need more money. There's no question that we need more money going into climate smart agriculture. But we have two options. We wait for that money to come, or we do something with the money that we already have. And there's a lot of money today still in the public sector investing in agriculture that can be used on different purposes. Today, the world, 50 countries, OECD and emerging economies today, use around $500 billion of subsidies going to direct support to farmers. And that's not just the OECD countries, that's on emerging economies today. That has duplicated in the last 15 years. It was $255 billion 15 years ago. Today is $585 billion. That goes directly to market prices and direct support to farmers, okay? That money is used 60% on emerging economies, and that money goes primarily to staple crops, rice, wheat, maize. If that money can be rechanneled to use public goods, to use it more in a sustainable way, to use it to promote all these climate smart technologies that you're saying, if that money can be used to promote more nutritious food, okay, so we don't have the shortcomings of the Green Revolution when we provided calorie intakes, but we didn't deal with malnutrition. Then we're going to start using some of the money that we have today on trying to achieve the SDG2 much faster. So let me stop there. I think that I went beyond my time, but that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much. Again, very thought-provoking. I will very quickly now want to thank the panelists because they have been really very good about the time, which means that we do have a chance to hear from you, from the audience. If you have very brief comments or questions to pose to the panelists, there's two questions that I had thought to ask. And first question, after you've heard these interventions and the last intervention talking about how we look at rechanneling existing flows, the need for transformation that we've been hearing, the need for the win-win, which I think was very compellingly made by the World Bank. How, in your minds, which are the climate resilient good practices that can or have had large-scale impacts on hunger and on climate risk reduction? What, in your experiences, really builds upon many of the elements that have been discussed in the panel that can help deliver and make good on the promise of SDG2? So I see a gentleman over there. I will be asking you to please say your name and the organization that you represent. And again, asking everybody to keep your questions very, very short so that we can give the panelists an opportunity to respond to you. So please go ahead.
My name is Lulu Johnson from Parliament in South Africa. I hear all the time, without any fail, mentioning being made about technology. But I also hear all the time, not once do we always say, or rather do we say anything about making use of old technology that has gone through times, old technology, insofar as use as part of our adaptation programs. That's the first point. Mm-hmm. One would really wish that we go back to that history, proven technologies that have worked over centuries. That'll be the first one. In South Africa, fortunately, under the new administration under President Zuma, we've had, in relation to the point raised by a number of speakers here, a new department called Rural Development and Land Reform, which is very dedicated towards the point raised by President of IFAD. That would be one national experience that we're really talking about. The last point I really want to make, on so far as financing is concerned, you can have all these billions and trillions of dollars. If you do not focus on education, on capacity, you are doomed. You're forever going to get all these applications for funding, but are always going to be failing, going nowhere with all these beautiful ideas that we talk about.
If so, if one could really wish to say, as you go into any of the respective countries, let there be that capacity building.
Thank you very much. The next question here. Please identify yourself. And I just want to remind everybody that you can ask also questions of the previous panelists. We have our distinguished panelists are all in the room, so please feel free to address your questions to them too. Please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Christina Swiderska. I work at IIED, International Institute for Environment and Development. I appreciate very much all of the panelists here and the previous ones, and really appreciate the fact that Jose Graziano da Silva mentioned agroecology as part of the solution. We're finding that traditional knowledge-based agroecological practices are really improving yields and incomes of farmers in high-risk areas like high mountains and also drylands. There's growing evidence that agroecological approaches are a really important part of the solution, and a lot of them are based on traditional knowledge. So I think we need to reconsider a little bit the role of science as we go forward and see traditional knowledge as complementary to science, because science doesn't have all the answers. And if we only focus on science, we're very likely to erode traditional knowledge. UNESCO estimates that 50 to 90% of all languages will be lost by 2100, and languages are a carrier of traditional knowledge. So let's try and think of ways of linking the two. For example, participatory plant breeding is a really important way forward for climate resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing that this is going to be a very rich set of exchanges that will really complement the previous exchanges. I see a request for the floor here and then here.
Hello, my name is Divya Gurung. I represent WOCAN, Women Women. I'm so sorry, I forgot my own organization name. It's called Women.
It's a long call.
Yes,
We understand.
yes, okay, I'm tired. I just arrived yesterday. But I represent WOCAN. My main question and my main concern about the climate smart agriculture, which you talked about, is if you really are want to focus, as you said, on women and poor rural women, with my experience and our experience, it shows that if you don't make investment in terms of capacity, in terms of systems, both on the service providing side, who are providing the services, and on the community side. So what I see in all the 25 years of experience I've worked is we don't see when we go down to the district or beyond the district to the community level. So my main request or my concern to this scope is please make investment both on the service providers and the community. Thank you.
Very good. Right here and then here. If you can please pass the microphone, sort of just keep going. Thank you.
My name is Megan Rowling. I'm a journalist, so I'm just going to ask a question. Mr. Graziano da Silva, you mentioned the paralysis here at the COP on agriculture. I would like to have a little bit more of your opinion and other panelists, if they would like to answer, about how damaging that paralysis is for work on boosting adaptation in agriculture, and what would be the most helpful thing to happen within the context of the UN climate talks for that work to advance towards helping farmers and achieving zero hunger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see somebody else asking for the floor. I'll ask you to go ahead, and then we will do another round of questions. So please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ben Schachter. I'm with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The Paris Preamble calls upon all states to respect, promote, and consider all human rights when taking climate action. And the agreement specifically refers to food security and hunger. Yet, as far as I noted today, the human right to food has not been the subject of much of the discourse. I wanted to raise this. In 2015, a Human Rights Council panel discussion found that climate change is affecting the availability, adaptability, and affordability of quality food. The IPCC's fifth assessment report notes that climate change is already having a negative impact on agriculture. The SR on the right to food recently concluded, that's the UN Special Rapporteur on the Human Right to Food recently concluded climate change poses a distinct threat to food security by affecting crops, livestock, fisheries, aquaculture, and people's livelihoods. Because human rights are legally binding and states have promised to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill these rights, states have obligations to address climate change. And what I wanted to ask is how we can ensure that a rights-based approach to agri-ecological strategies, which offers potential solutions, reduced emissions, and environmental degradation, as well as climate resilience and protection of biodiversity, is employed, and how we can see that human rights considerations are integrated in the work of the UNFCCC on food and agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for these very insightful both questions and comments that I think are really advancing our conversation. I would like to propose that to ask the panelists if they would like to react to any of the questions that were posed. There was one for you, Mr. Graziano, that was very direct, but I think the others are questions that are broader or just issues. So if we can be also short in our reflections, we'll have an opportunity for another round. So I would maybe ask you to kick off in responding to a very direct question, and then ask the panelists to think about if there's other questions or issues that would raise that you would like to address. Please.
Thank you, Paula. Well, let me clarify. What I referred to was the fact that we didn't reach a consensus on the discussions about how agriculture will be included, let's say, in the Paris Agreement. That is the issue. What that means, what are the risks? Well, first, we are losing time in a crucial moment. We don't have that time to lose. We are only 14 years to reach the Millennium Goals. And what we can see very clear is that despite the SDG 13 be the climate change is undermining all other SDGs. We will not achieve food security for all. We will not eradicate poverty if we don't find a way to couple with the impacts of climate change. That is for sure. So this became more or less, perhaps, so important that climate change now is a kind of envelope of the SDGs. My biggest concern is that when you see the points raised by the negotiators, let's say, they are not new. They are old things. They are only excuse not to move ahead. In this moment that we are all concerned about how to start to act, postpone this decision for agriculture that affect the most poor of the poor, like Nuance stressed, people in rural areas, in developing countries, and also that affect 4 out of 5 of the national determined contributions. So this is a big risk. We are really more than other things that have been said that will paralyze, take it out, etc. This is a really concern for put in place and started to act the Paris Agreement. Let me take the opportunity to answer 2 things. One was already mentioned, agroecology is part of the recovery of this traditional knowledge. I would like to make a point on that. Don't blame science. Agroecology is based on a lot of science, good science. Let's make clear that we have now a need for a new paradigm. The Green Revolution gave its contribution long time, the last 50 years, It avoided millions of people not to get hunger. But now that we are in a global world, we need to focus more on this level, local level. And for that, we need to be more specifically approach. And this commodities approach, let's say, does not fit anymore. One solution does not fit all. You walk on this corridor on this COP22, and you have an idea of the diversity of this world. So we cannot come for one solution for all. And this is what is about this new paradigm. We will only achieve it with a lot of new science. We need to be science-based on our approach. Finally, one comment about education that was raised by, I really believe that among the things that we need, investment and in many other, one is education. Yesterday, I wanted to see a Morocco experience named Eco Ecole, that the children under 11 are taught on principles of agroecology. And they decided a project with targeted 3 things. They are urban, huh? They're near the peri-urban area of Marrakesh. And they decided to tackle 3 things: water, energy, and waste. And they are doing a lot of good things, innovation, etc., practice, etc. So we need that. We need people to get engaged, and we need youth and children to start this new approach. Education is really fundamental for changing minds for the future. Thank you. Sorry for the time.
No, I think that, thank you very much. I think that those responses really start to bring a lot of closure to some of the conversations we've had. I don't think, I've been looking at my watch, I don't think, unfortunately, we're going to have opportunity for another round of conversations. I would have liked that. So what I would ask is the panelists to consider the next round of interventions, your closing statements, any final thoughts or reflections you might have. Clearly need for transformation. I think the World Bank compellingly told us about what the trajectories look like. We've heard conversations about human rights, about poverty, about inclusion, the need to work with women and children, whole of system approaches, and the need for integration, both in terms of how we frame the problem as well as how we respond to the problem. But above all, also that there's real opportunities for win-win if we look at mitigation, adaptation, and the whole array of issues in the SDGs, but as the Minister of Costa Rica said, how we deliver on the other SDGs. So let me turn to the final round of panelists. Maybe if I can ask you, sir, if you would like to give a final round. We want to make sure that panelists from the first round have an opportunity for closing statements, but I do ask that we make this very, very short. It disappeared. It's back. So very short, so I can give all the panelists a chance for just final thoughts.
Thank you very much. This challenge of climate change and reducing hunger really brings together many of the things that have been said here. Knowledge-based agriculture, intensive, but not in input, but in knowledge agriculture. And that means knowledge about the agroecosystem, know your system well, and that means scientific and traditional knowledge, that means know what is going on in your soil, in your plants, in your community, in your landscape, in your territory. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You've really set a marker for brevity. Thank you very much. Can I then ask perhaps the president of IFAD if you would like Mr. Kinwaze to give us some final thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. With respect to the questions that were asked, the various questions, I mean, Graziano gave a very good, comprehensive answer. But let me just quickly say that some of the issues that were raised, you don't expect a panel that's He's given about 4 to 5 minutes to be able to give you a whole array of things that have been done by various institutions. I know, unfortunately, when we discuss climate change, we tend to forget that you cannot address climate change in isolation. Just as well, when we talk about zero hunger or food security and nutrition, we couldn't do that in isolation of climate change. There's two sides of the same coin. And most of the successful practices that I have seen out in the field that have been scaled up by IFAD, traditional practices of farmers, which we take and put them through the science that we have and regurgitate it. So please, again, I want to say very, very clearly, this is a comprehensive approach to development. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very 1 minute from the World Food Programme, and then I would like to ask our two remaining panelists, the ministers of Fiji and Afghanistan, to give us their final words of guidance and wisdom. Please.
Thank you very much. Just to endorse what has been said, fully agree with what has been suggested. I think I would like to underline two other points. There is a need to blend the solutions to bring together different factors that can help address issues. And that means also bringing technology, science, and traditional knowledge on the ground. There is a need to be context-specific, but also to think global. There are too many interdependencies today. The region in which I work imports 50% of its cereals from abroad. It's very dependent on abroad. And there is finally a need for national leadership and for a strong 2030 vision. We need to have national leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. National leadership is a beautiful segue to our two final interventions. Your Excellency, Your Royal Highness, if I can ask you for final thoughts.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam. I hope everybody can hear me. I'll be briefer than brief. We can and we should. We have a moral obligation to humanity. There is no going back. Thank you.
That was brilliant. And from the incoming COP23 presidency.
I think that sums it all up. But for that to happen, we just need to cooperate. And we all have a responsibility. And let's take ownership of this. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. A round of applause for all the panelists and for the audience, which gave such good questions. Thank you so much.
Sí, sí. Eso me interesa muchísimo. Me interesa muchísimo.